If you study old bridges, granaries, longhouses, or ship timbers that have survived far longer than modern construction ever promises, you begin to notice something uncomfortable. These structures were not protected by chemical formulas, factory coatings, or proprietary systems. They endured because the people who built them understood wood as a living material even after it was cut. They treated timber not to make it perfect, but to make it resilient. Somewhere along the way, we replaced that logic with convenience. Today, many assume old wood lasted because it was better wood. In truth, it lasted because it was treated intelligently. In this guide, we are going to walk through several forgotten wood treatments that were chosen not out of tradition, but out of necessity and observation. These methods were logical, repeatable, and effective, and they still are. You know, long before anyone worried about bugs or fungus, builders were mostly concerned about water. Moisture was really seen as the main enemy, because it invited everything else. That's why early wood treatments focused on moisture rather than insects or rot. So, as a result, early treatments were actually designed to manage how wood absorbed and released moisture, instead of sealing it up completely. One common practice back then was soaking posts or beams in running water for weeks, sometimes even months. This process would leach out the sugars and sap that fed decay organisms. Nowadays, a modern application of this idea might be submerging green lumber in a creek or a large tank for several weeks before letting it season. The wood ends up drying more slowly afterward, and, well, it becomes a lot less attractive to insects. You know, charring was actually used to harden wood rather than just preserve it cosmetically. It's often misunderstood these days. Charring wasn't done for appearance at all. The real purpose was to alter the surface chemistry of the wood. A light surface burning would close the pores of the wood, drive off any surface moisture, and, well, create a carbon layer that's pretty hostile to fungi and insects. Fence posts, sill beams, and ground contact timbers were commonly charred for this reason. If you want to apply this technique today, just lightly scorch the outer surface of a post until it darkens but doesn't crack. Then go ahead and brush off any loose char. The result is a surface that sheds water and resists decay without trapping moisture inside. Why natural oils were chosen for penetration, not shine. Oils like linseed were not finishes in the modern sense. They were structural treatments. Applied warm and thin, they penetrated deep into dry wood fibers and polymerized slowly, strengthening the surface from within. Crucially, excess oil was wiped away, not layered. So, if you want to apply this logic today, just heat raw or traditional boiled linseed oil, gently apply it sparingly to dry wood and, allow several weeks between coats. The wood becomes tougher but not glossy. Here's how ash, lime, and alkaline washes discourage decay. Wood ash mixed with water creates an alkaline solution that fungi really dislike. Historic builders washed beams, boards, and even tool handles with weak ash lye. Lime wash served a similar purpose, especially on exterior timber. These treatments did not stop moisture, but they shifted the biological environment. A modern step would be washing exterior wood with diluted wood ash water, allowing it to dry fully before oiling. This is especially useful for sheds, barns, and survival structures. Smoke wasn't just a byproduct, it was actually used as a preservative. Smokehouses didn't only preserve meat, but interestingly enough, they also preserved wood. Roof timbers above hearths were constantly bathed in smoke, which, over time, deposited phenols and resins into the wood. This process, well, it reduced insect activity and slowed decay. Some cultures even went so far as to deliberately smoke their tools and wooden vessels. If you live off-grid or use wood stoves, allowing certain items to age in a smoke-rich environment is not accidental. It is preservation by chemistry. How salt was used cautiously and deliberately. Salt attracts moisture, which makes it dangerous if misused. Yet in controlled applications, brine soaking was used for marine timbers and certain tools. Salt displaced water in wood and, discouraged marine organisms. The key was context. If you apply this knowledge today, you should reserve salt treatments for maritime or constantly wet environments and avoid sealed interiors where moisture could be trapped. In the past, movement in wood was respected rather than restricted. The old treatments actually worked well because they allowed the wood to move naturally. Nothing really was ever designed to lock timber into a static state. That's why those old beams might crack, but they just don't fail. Modern treatments quite often fail because they trap moisture and stress inside the wood. When applying traditional methods, you should always allow full drying between stages. It's really important not to rush the oiling, charring, or washing. These treatments, created layered protection. Rarely was just one method used alone. For instance, a ground post might be water-leached, then air-seasoned, charred, and finally oiled. Each step, honestly, addressed a different weakness. You can apply this layered logic today. For example, a reclaimed oak beam for outdoor use can be cleaned, then lightly charred, washed with ash water, dried thoroughly, and finally oiled. This process does take time, but the result is wood that, ages gracefully. Now, why did these methods matter for survival and continuity? For historical communities, failed wood meant collapsed roofs, lost harvests, and real danger. Treatments were chosen because they worked, not because they were traditional. That logic still applies. Whether you are restoring old timber or preparing materials for long-term use, forgotten wood treatments offer something modern products often do not. They allow wood to endure without dependency. If this kind of grounded, field-tested knowledge matters to you, keep it alive. Subscribe to Relic Logic for more deep explorations into the systems that built lasting structures before shortcuts existed. Share this video with someone who believes strength comes from understanding, not acceleration. Relic Logic.